Hi, I'm Deb Hiett, and if you'd like to learn a little bit about me and my podcast play, please continue to watch this video. I fell in love with theater in 8th grade. I just moved to a new school, and I was lucky enough that it had a really great theater program. It was a very small school, but one of the English teachers was a former actress, and so she was very devoted to teaching plays and understanding theater in a cultural way, but also to actually have plays and musicals. We have one musical every year. But I started, I'm trying to think of the very first play I ever did there. I can't remember. It might have been The Skin of Our Teeth. But it was one of those communities where you paint the sets, you build the props, you strike everything, you help set up lights. You're a part of the entire thing. So it was a very holistic approach to theater. And so you build this family. It's a very tight community that comes together very quickly and very deeply, and that was really that saved me in a lot of ways, and just made me fall in love with the process and the product. And it was also just I had always been studying music, and I had always been writing like short fiction and poetry, and I was very much a creative person before then, but this was really the way to funnel all of that into one great package. So that's when I first fell in love with theater. And why did I have to be a part of the theater world? It's become very clear to me this year in particular that it's very much a part of my soul. It's a thing I have tried so hard to do anything else and love it as much. I really have. I have worked so many different jobs, and I have tried different aspects of the creative world, and I always come back to theater. So that tells me that it's that important to me, and that my ache for it right now, my yearning, is not just nostalgia. It's really it's also an excitement to get back to it, because I feel like it's going to be, my hope is that it's going to be different in all the best ways, that there's no going back to what we had, and that's fine. It's going to be different and fantastic. And I feel this like pent up excitement to get back to it. So it'll happen. It has to happen. It always happens, even when it has to stop in the past, it always comes back. So that gives me hope. I think theater is unique because of the electricity, because of the immediacy, the connection, the spontaneity. There's you can't, there's no way to capture it, as we've seen with all these filmed versions of plays and musicals, which can be very wonderful in their own right, but it's not the same. There's nothing like being in the same space as someone, and there's nothing like being on stage with an audience and getting that electric current going in both directions. So I think that's the biggest part of it, that immediacy and that urgency and electricity. I have always, I feel like I have always been writing. I had open heart surgery when I was 4, and I remember being in my bed just kind of scribbling, writing. I feel like it's just therapeutic, and it helps me organize my head a little bit. When did I start writing things that were actually stories? Probably Probably remember second or third grade. Probably third grade. There was a story about a family on Mars, and it was like it could have been set in my actual house, but it was on Mars, so people were like it's very it was very much an earnest attempt to write what you know, but set it someplace exotic, which I thought Mars would be super fun. So I think I've always been a storyteller, and have early memories of putting pen to paper. I actually, for a while when I was living in New York, I made a living writing monologues for other actors, because you're usually expected to have 2 or 3 monologues of 2 or 3 minutes in length. Sometimes they want a classical piece, but sometimes they want something very different. And I've always been a character actor, even when I was 19, when I moved to New York. And so I found it hard to find material for myself that was weird like I was, and something to get their attention. So I wrote pieces for myself and my friends, and then word got out, and I would just meet with the actor, talk to them about the kind of role that they would want to get for themselves, and then come up with a character. And that was really fun. And then I ended up going back to college at NYU and got my degree in writing and philosophy. And that writing in particular was fiction writing, as opposed to screenwriting or playwriting. And I just loved it. So I think storytelling has always been a thing that I do, that I want to do all the time. What attracts me to the form of plays, in a weird way, I feel like you can almost do anything in a play, which is odd because in a film, of course, you can do anything, but you're so removed from it with a film, whereas in theater, when you go to a play and they do something really theatrical, it's transcendent. It changes you, and so I love that element of playwriting. That said, not all of my plays have, magical moments, or amazing theatrical tricks. But there is something about writing for a space in a certain amount of time that things happen right in front of people that feels like a puzzle that I need to solve. And I love puzzles. Don't really have a process. I get an idea. I think it's genius. I sit down to write about it, and then I think it's terrible. I usually walk away in disgust. Then I get an idea about how to make it work. Then I think it's fabulous again. I sit down, I make it work, and I find a new way that it sucks. And then I have to walk away from it and question all my life choices. Then, usually when I'm in the shower or stuck in traffic, I'll think, there you go. That would be cool. And then I go back to it and it's cool. And then I send it to people and it gets rejected. And then I think it's terrible again. And then I reread it and I think, my gosh, this is great. So I find another way to send it out, or I find a way to do it, or I adapt it into something else, or I persist. So my process is a sequence of allowing myself the ability to fail, to be terrible, to write terrible, horrible nonsensical dialogue, in ridiculous, nobody would ever believe this situations. And then I just try to make it better and more interesting and more unexpected. And in doing that, it gets better. Somehow it gets better. But it is a relentless series of mind gymnastics to make something happen with it and not just, drink heavily. In terms of a day-to-day process, I try to write something every day. I don't sit down at a particular time. I don't have a magic candle that I have to burn I don't have a lot of that. Maybe I should. But in general, I feel like if I can write a little bit every day and allow myself the ability to not be good at it and not to have a certain expectation, then I end up with something. And sometimes I have to throw a lot of it out and keep going. But when it's going well, it feels like I'm just leaning in and listening to an existing conversation, and I'm just taking notes. I'm just taking dictation. That doesn't mean that it always stays or that it's ever the perfect thing, but that flow feels like a gift. That flow is the goal every day. And if I can get in that flow, the whole world disappears. I will not focus on anything else. When I'm not in that flow, I'll be working on something and I'll look over and say, oh, I haven't washed those windows in 4 years. And then suddenly I'll find the energy to go and wash the windows when I should be working through the problem. So it's a laborious process, but it gets better. I was lucky enough to be invited to join Antaeus Playwrights Lab several years ago. I don't remember how many years ago. I've been a part of the lab for several years and found it just invaluable in terms of having a group of amazing actors to be able to hear them read early pages, really rough work. And it helps so much to hear what's working and what's not working, as opposed to just hearing it in my head, which is its own joyful cacophony. But it's much healthier for my family life to have other people put it into their mouths. And I have, more than anything, I feel like I have found a community in this group and friends and people that I trust and people that are really working hard for the same things that I'm working hard on, things that they're really driven. They take it very seriously. It's wonderful fun, but it's also serious business. And I just really appreciate the community of actors and other playwrights and everyone involved with Antaeus. That has been so important to me in Los Angeles, really, to have that home is what it feels like. It's great. So when the prompt went out to propose this, I felt really excited. And that was also nice to feel excited about an opportunity this year like this. And then to be selected for it was just a lifesaver. When I first moved to Los Angeles from New York, I was working for a while as a organizer, like a personal organizer. People would hire me to come and, it ran the gamut. But there was one woman that hired me, and she lived in one of those high-rise apartments in Westwood, and she was lovely. And she was probably in her mid-80s, had lived a very small but happy life, and for a very long time in this apartment. And so she had hired me to help go through a bunch of stuff that she had accumulated over the years. And so I got to know her a little bit, and I was surprised that she could, to me, she could have been living in any little college town in anywhere. Her world really was limited to UCLA, where she'd worked for her whole career, and her apartment. And it was fine. She was very happy, and it was fine. But it was interesting, because I think, well, you live in LA, you have this broad, in all these broad interests, and you go here and go there, and you have all these interesting friends, and her world was very small, and it always sort of stuck with me. And there's a little bit of a running theme in my work of awakening people who have been maybe sleepwalking through their life a little bit, and fine, but something happens that makes them realize that there is a lot more to life, or there's a bigger world out there than they might have realized, or they need to be awakened to some aspect of their world that is keeping them from being happy. Earlier this year, a friend of mine had attended a peaceful protest that had turned not peaceful. And his experience in the aftermath of just understanding how volatile the situation can be, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, how a movement can be hijacked, how people who are trying to keep the peace maybe have other motives, and just how fraught those situations can be. And so I thought of, what if there was a woman who was older, who maybe wanted to get involved for the companionship as much as anything, who wanted to feel like part of a bigger movement, and really did not understand how complicated things would get. And so that was sort of the kernel of Westwood. And when I learned that the FBI headquarters, an FBI headquarter office, is in Westwood, I thought, oh yeah, that's my neighborhood for this play. I felt compelled to write it because there's this great saying: if you genuinely need to tell a story, there's genuinely someone who needs to hear it. And this year, I also learned, I created an addendum for that, which is, if you don't know what to say, maybe it's time to just listen. So for many months, I was not writing. I just didn't know what to say, and realized that I had to just listen and try to evaluate and allow for my own kind of waking up, coming to terms with all kinds of aspects of my life. And it was the story that I really wanted to tell, that I felt that compulsion to tell, that I hadn't felt really for the whole year. And so I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity to tell it and have it be brought to life with such immediacy, and also with such professionalism at Antaeus. It's just amazing. So yeah, I think that it's a big year for people waking up, and it seems like it's an opportunity, even if it feels like a crisis. It's it's maybe both, but it's certainly going to be different going forward. And we get to choose how engaged we want to be and can be, and feel the obligation to be as engaged as we can be. Working with the director, Carolyn Radray, was so helpful. It really is such a process. This is another part of theater that I appreciate so much, is the collaborative aspect of it. Film is also collaborative, but in a very different way for the writer. And so I appreciate how respectful everyone is of the process of writing, but also taking what I have and elevating it and taking it to different places that I hadn't even fully considered. It was also a very abbreviated development period, just by necessity. So I also appreciated working with really smart people who can very carefully, but with straightforward energy, get to the point and say, here's what I think. What do you think about this? And it just allowed for a great back and forth. And I like to work quickly, so that worked out. And then when we got the actors involved, I mean, it's always just such a joy to have great actors and just hear the words in their mouth. I mean, you can't, it always just takes it up another level. I keep saying elevated, but it's true. It just feels like it takes it to a new level. And once you start to hear that actor in your head, then when you go back to rewrite, it's like, oh, you can start to really get a feel for how they would say it and have a sense of that very clearly in your mind. I think that's some of the music training too in my life, of just hearing it, and it's a symphony. And so you're just trying to put in all the different instruments at the right time, and hopefully at the right volume. But yeah, it was amazing. The whole team was amazing. Jeff also, just his magic with sound design. So I'm so excited for everyone to hear it. Writing for a podcast versus a regular play is interesting. And in particular, for this piece, I wanted to not go down the traditional path of what I have in my head as a radio play, but more present the story in a series of digital files. And by that, I mean, these are all clips that would be in a digital file that the FBI might have on you or me. And so in this world of surveillance, that could be a file that was taken from someone's Alexa. It could be taken from a handheld recorder. It could be taken from a room mic in an interrogation room. But there's no interstitial information between these two files. It's really just listening to these clips and piecing the story together as it goes. So that idea really appealed to me when I sort of thought maybe the story would work if I could tell it that way. And fortunately, Antaeus was up for the challenge of putting that together, since it is a little bit different. So, but yeah, I think in general, listening to a story versus having the advantage of seeing it, it's a wonderful way of telling a story. It's very different. So, how do you infuse those nuances just by listening? It's fascinating, and it was super fun. I want the audience to be entertained first and foremost. I would love it if the audience hung on to the story for a while, if it stuck with them, if it makes them think. I don't want to say too specifically because I don't want to spoil it. But I do think there is, we're at a such a specific time in history, and how much we get involved in the world around us, even if it's our neighborhood, and with people that we care about, and extending ourselves for those people and those things that we hold dear, those causes and projects. And I think it's important for people to evaluate that for themselves, and make those decisions, and then decide how to act if they choose to act. So if it makes somebody think about that even a little bit, that would be great. I am looking forward to picturing each neighborhood as I'm listening to this. Now, I say that knowing that my play is not exactly a travelogue of Westwood. It's not about Westwood specifics in the neighborhood, although there are a little bit it is. But I'm looking forward to, there's so many different disparate neighborhoods represented in the series, and I haven't read any of the other pieces. So I'm really looking forward to just listening and doing a mental drive-by of all these different areas, some of which I'm not that familiar with. And it's certainly exciting to imagine how they might be represented. So I'm just looking forward to it. People must listen to these, because what else are you going to be doing? It's like, why not? They're less than 30 minutes each. They're free, and they'll take you away. They will take you away from the mental anguish of living your life, of the stresses of everyday existence these days. It's an opportunity to disappear into another world for a little bit. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want that? Theater is critical in every culture, in every society, for hundreds and hundreds of years. It has survived, it has persevered, it has morphed into this or that, but the importance has always remained the same. Smaller theaters are perhaps more important because they tell stories that other theaters don't. They are often more representative of the community because they're casting from the community. They're developing stories through playwrights labs, through other people in the community. It's very hands-on. It's very grassroots. And bigger theaters are wonderful. They've got big splashy shows. They bring in tours from all over. They cast out of town. It's great. It's just a different thing. It's just a different dessert. But you must have, and there will always be, smaller theaters that are so important. And especially when you have a high quality and a real dedication to detail and professionalism and a rigorous evaluation of talent in every department. It's important. And the more that people can support that, however they can support it, and especially now it's so difficult because they have to be closed for the foreseeable future. That won't always be the case, but certainly most smaller theaters and larger theaters, but especially smaller theaters, are trying to find ways to reach their audience right now, given these parameters. And so It's easy to just put it out of your mind because they're not open, and so you can't go see something. But even small donations, donations in kind, ways that you can help a theater amplify the program that they are trying to do, anything that anyone can do to, again, it's that energy, put that energy into these smaller communities that are so vital. I think it's more important than ever right now. And in the next year or 2 or 3 or however long we have to look forward to these new limits. When theater opens, it's so important that people support Antaeus Theater and theaters like Antaeus, because these are your neighbors. These are this is your community. And by supporting it, by attending live theater and giving your energy and your money to these communities, you are building your community. You are supporting your friends and family. It's just as important as supporting your school or your house of worship. I really believe that. I think it plays that big of a role in the community. And places like Antaeus that are sticklers for quality and inclusion, that are really examining their role in the world at large, that's a group of people that you want to support. I'm Deb Hiett, and if you enjoyed this conversation, please check out antaeus.org and learn more about how to see and hear these zip code plays. You can also check out more about me at debhiett.com, DEBHIETT.com.